Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to walk you through some prompts for a compassionate, no pressure life assessment. We know that assessment seems like a really big term, but it's actually going to be just a few sentences that are going to give you really good, clean access to where you're at right now and where you might like to go. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving, and you can learn more about us and how to practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we're going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
Okay, so this practice, I have no idea where it came from, but I am a fan of noticing and feeling the impulses that just arise. And I have no idea whether this is going to be like a pleasant body connection practice. I mean, it's not going to be super unpleasant. I'll put that out there. But all to say, I have no idea why this came up, and I have no idea what it's going to start for me or for you or for those of you who are trying this out. But if you're game, let's play. I like to take a little moment just to feel where I am. So for me right now, that means I want to feel my hands on my legs. I'm moving my shoulders around a little and my hips around a bit. And I'm just looking around my space. So you can choose what you want to do to get a sense of where you're at right now. And then here comes, I feel like there should be a drum roll. Maybe just Steph can add a drum roll. I have never done this in my life, so I don't know why it came up. But it's to like make a heart with your hands. And just notice how that feels to do. Yeah. That's all. Oh, I've never tried that one either. Making hearts with your fingers. And like, notice how this feels. Maybe like Steph's playing between the two. Which one feels better? I like the hearts with my hand better. The heart with my hand feels better.
Yeah, it feels more open.
And I like looking through it.
I liked kissing through it.
And what I really particularly enjoy is actually seeing your face.
Oh.
As you hold the heart, like there's a softening in your face. Yeah. And there's like a playful feel to this for me. And that connects me to like a breath that's softer and more expansive.
Yeah, this is probably doing something with our nervous system. I mean, I notice right off the bat as I make this shape with my hands, I want to bring it closer to my chest. I like the feeling of my thumbs being in contact with my sternum and my heart behind it. That all feels related.
Okay, so now I'm sort of riffing off what you just said. So I'm really noticing my fingers, like sort of where my knuckles are for those 8 fingers pressing against each other. And I feel my thumbs pressed against each other. And now I'm bringing it to my sternum. And as I feel that touch, I notice my eyes wanted to close. And I'm just connecting with the knowing that I'm loved I don't know why that came up, but I'm loved and there's people in this world who care about me. And so I'm just going to sit for a moment with how that feels in the body to just be with. Yeah, and then it sort of brings a smile to my face. Like, I'm just connecting with the knowing that there's people out there in the world who care about me, care about whether I'm doing well or not. Yeah.
I think there's so much to be said here about symbolism, right? This heart, like it's such a simple thing. It's such a simple image, and it has such a deep meaning and so many attachments to us as people. You know, you see that symbol and it has this ripple effect in our being, in our mind. And it's a really simple way to bring love in the moment, and whatever comes up, that's what we associate it with.
Yeah, and so this is neat because I've never done this before. Like, I know lots of people make hearts with their hands and fingers, but it's never been a thing I've done. So I had no idea what it would elicit in me doing it. But I was curious. I was like, oh, I wonder how that's going to feel. Like, my curiosity is often, especially in the last, I don't know, number of years, I'm curious what gets stirred up in my body, what I notice happening in my body when I do something or when I say something. So that's what I was tracking for. And I think the biggest delightful thing I noticed was how much I enjoy looking at your face when you were doing this, and like the softness and the joy in your face. So like it reminds me of, oh, like I really like feeling that connection with people, like seeing expression on their face, right? Seeing delight on their face. Like that really does something for me. So that was a good reminder. And then I just liked that you shared, you know, what happened next for you. Like, I hold my hands like this, and then I actually wanted to bring it closer to me. And then I got curious. I'm like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like if I did that. And then I just let the next things unfold.
Yeah.
And the next thing, or one of the next things that unfolded was, first thing was I noticed how it felt to hold my hands like this and then against my body. I'm like, oh, this feels sort of nice. And then I was curious, like, oh, like, could I give this symbol either a meaning, or could I help myself connect to something through this symbol? And the thing I felt pulled to connect to was just knowing that there's people out there that care about me. Right. And then I was curious, what is it like if I pause with that knowing, that thought? What shows up in my body? I'm like, oh, it sort of felt nice. It was a nice feeling in my body.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
A nice feeling that you would not have connected with in this moment if you hadn't done this thing.
No, exactly. So it's an extra nice moment that I get to experience today because I decided to follow that impulse and the next impulse and the next impulse, because I knew that none of those impulses were going to take me down some horrible road, right? Like, it's nice giving yourself permission to follow some of our impulses instead of talking ourselves out and making them stupid or a waste of time, because many of our impulses probably don't cause, you know, a lot of harm.
No.
So, yeah. Neat.
Creating a moment and being with it instead of needing to know what happens next, or needing to orchestrate the next moment, or imagining what might happen if I made a heart shape with my hands, but not bothering to do it, and then having no thread of action to pursue.
Yes, or something I think I used to do a lot in a way to sort of make sense of the world and stay safe and give myself like an okay feeling was I always wanted to understand why, but what does this mean? And there's nothing wrong with those questions. They're really important and helpful questions. But I've been really leaning into the practice of being with. Let's just be with what arises and notice how that feels.
Yeah.
And like be curious about what might arise, because I have no idea. And I growing that muscle to be like, I'm okay with I have no idea what arises.
Yes, that is such a driving factor for so many subconscious motivations. I know we're off topic and only a few minutes in, but already 90 Day Fiancé is coming to mind.
We need a tracker. We obviously need a tracker to see like how long it takes for an episode. I'm going to say to go sideways, but it's not really sideways, to go straight towards 90 Day Fiancé. And here we are, everybody.
So good. Yeah, it doesn't take long. There's just so many prime examples. You see this often, 90 Day Fiancé or like in any relationship program or training or therapy, there are inevitably people
I like
in
that
a
you link those
relationship.
things together. We need to pause for a moment. You're like, in any 90 Day Fiancé or relationship therapy, because they're obviously the same.
They are. Yeah, if you're in a relationship, you're in some form of therapy, whether it's conscious or intentional or not. Therapy is happening. And it's often, I'm thinking of a particular woman who wants to know what is going on. She needs to know. She's very uncomfortable. She's anxious. She wants to know what her partner's intentions are and she wants to know what this is, which is such a fair thing to want to know. Yeah. And often on the other side.
For 1 sec? Can we pause for 1 sec? As I heard you say that, I just felt a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of compassion for those of us, myself included, if you've ever found yourself in a place of, I just need to know or want to know what's happening because I feel so uncomfortable not knowing, so not at ease. Could you please just tell me what is happening here in this relationship? And so hearing you say that, describing this woman, I'm like, yeah, like that was a real fear for a lot of us. And we lived for a long time with the belief that the only way to feel a little bit better is to get an answer from somebody.
Yeah, from somebody else.
Hopefully from somebody else. And hopefully an answer that I want to hear.
Yeah.
Right. And that my whole sense of peace and well-being is hinging upon that. And like, yeah.
And how often, though, does that answer end up not feeling good when it comes? It's an answer we thought we wanted. We thought we wanted this thing, and then we finally got it, and this isn't actually the thing, right? So this is part of what I'm trying to get at with this anxiety of uncertainty that we're trying to manage and that we're hoping to teach people to be with, that uncertainty and that discomfort. Because on the other side of a relationship dynamic like this, where one person wants to know, needs to know what's going on, it's not uncommon to find the opposite, the partner, wanting to actually just feel things out and see how it feels, right? And like, I can't tell you what it is because we're here to try to feel into it. And then this poor woman who just wants connection is screaming like, no, I need to know what this means. And he's like, cool, this is not feeling good. This is pressure. This is you're asking for, answers that I don't currently have. And it's this dance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So in a simple practice of, let's just put our hands in the shape of a heart and be open to discovering what appears, what shows up. We're growing that muscle of being okay with the unknown.
Yeah.
Right? Being curious about, I wonder what happens next. Right? In a way where I think like holding this heart up for most of us is not going to create such an emotional charge that we're completely dysregulated and can't be with what comes up. Right? But like, you don't have to, like, it's just, let me drink a cup of tea and notice what comes up next.
Notice what comes up. Because we don't know, and especially if it's relationships where we've got all of these hopes and dreams and stories about how a relationship should look. We're going to be looking for specific outcomes. We're not going to be feeling into those outcomes. We don't know how we're going to feel. We don't know what we're going to want. We have to be able to be with the moment and develop the capacity to be with the great uncertainty of life and the uncertainty of every moment,
Mm-hmm. I like that you're reminding me of like when I lived more from that place of being driven by my fear, right? Because I have lived in that place before, especially relationally. Like I just thought I wanted someone to say, I'm in this with you. I'm in this relationship. I'm not going anywhere. But like you said, well, after I heard that, and it was good for a moment, and I probably didn't even enjoy that moment. I was like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, would that be forever? Like, under which circumstances would you go? And like, and then there's the next layer of questions and the next layer of questions. And what was interesting was maybe I got a little relief when someone said, hey, I'm in this with you. But then when I'm actually in the relationship, and if I'm awake and paying attention, right, which sometimes we are more than other times, I realize this relationship doesn't actually feel that good.
Yeah.
But I'm not paying attention to that. I'm not giving that any weight at all because I got the answer in words that I wanted. So this must be the place I should stay. Right? So here we're trying to keep growing that muscle of let's just be present with right now. Like right now, I'm present to, I have my cuticle oil on my table. I hear a vacuum in the hallway and I saw a little smile on your face and that felt nice. That's all.
Yeah. That's about the extent we ought to take things in our lives. That's as far as we should go at any point.
Well, unless it's like an emergency that needs us to act upon it immediately. And even then you need to have some presence to know what you're acting upon. Right? Yeah. I find that I've made life a lot more complicated for myself and the people in relationship with me because I didn't know how to be with that fear. And I didn't know how to be with the unknown. I didn't know how to source some sense of stability and security that was just rooted within myself. And I relied on it 100% to come from somebody else.
For sure.
And that puts us in a really vulnerable and also chaotic energy to live in.
And disempowered. And as you say, really, really temporary. Like so many of these questions and certainties that we're looking for from people and relationships in our lives are unconscious placeholders for the uncertainty and the unknown of life and death and existence generally. So like it comes bubbling back up and asking lots of questions. I mean, sometimes we need answers for practical reasons, but often it's just a salve for our anxiety. And so being able to be with that simple physical sensation of uncertainty and the discomfort that arises with it is an incredibly empowering tool, and one that we develop through doing these tiny little practices like the heart shape with our hands.
Yeah. And like I could imagine there might have been a time in my life when I was feeling more heartbroken or lonely or disconnected from the type of relationship I really wanted to be in, where if I made a heart like this and I looked at it, it might have actually brought a lot of like emotion in the form of like sadness and longing, and tears might have come or like just been welling up. And like, that doesn't mean that's bad. That doesn't mean this was a bad practice. It just means, oh, that's what's alive in me right now. That's what I've been holding also. And in this moment, I'm able to feel a little bit more of that. And so how do I want to tend to myself? Can I be with some of that emotion that's welling up or that longing that's very present for me right now? Right? Like today doing this, it just brought up whatever I told you it brought up. But like I could do it in 5 minutes or an hour or 2 weeks from now, and it might stir up, it will stir up something different.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't make that right or wrong. It just means, hey, I'm just practicing noticing what comes up. And like, can I practice growing my capacity to be with what's coming up in a way that's kind to myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meet the moment. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so this kind of brings us into what we're wanting to talk about today, is making a circumstance where you can comfortably look at what's working in your life and what isn't, and what is starting to work. So specifically, these are the prompts that we're going to be giving you and working through and giving you some examples of. But maybe, G, do you want to say a little bit first about the nature of assessments and like self-discovery and what we might be making things mean.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So when Steph was playing around with words, I'm like, what should we call this thing we're talking about today? Two of the phrases that came up were like life inventory or life assessment. And immediately, like my response, like just even notice when I say life inventory and life assessment, notice what happens in your body.
I'm bored to death and I want to not do it.
Right. Right. For me, I'm like assessment. Like there's an E and there's a tightening, and there's a very quick mental association with this must be like a big task. And we got to spend a lot of time now assessing things.
Yeah.
Right. And sure, like that's what you could do. Right. And you could do that with these prompts that we're going to offer you. But I want to just remind us that like what we're presenting here is something that can be done very quickly. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. And really what we're here presenting you an option to practice being with the reality of your life and helping you grow that muscle of, can I be with the reality? That was a very scary thing for me to be with in the past because I didn't feel like I had the tools to be with the reality, to face reality, to feel the sensations and hold the sensations that would stir up for me. And to, what's the word? To be with the barrage of my self-critical thoughts when it came to looking at the reality of my life, right? And then also not even just my self-critical thoughts, but like hearing like my parents' voice, right? Of what they would think about the reality of my life or etc. You know, whoever's opinion you care about. Yeah. And this is just a way that I find helps us grow our ability to be with the reality with some kindness, to grow our nervous system capacity to feel some of the sensations that come up when we look a little more closely at our reality in a way that's not completely overwhelming and completely stressful.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
It's actually a pretty welcoming way. And I want to echo a bit of what you said here in case it needs to be clarified for others as it did for me. You're not in trouble for whatever you discover. No one's going to know this. Your mom's not going to find out. Your boss is not going to find out. Your inner critic will be there with you, though. And that's a really interesting thing to notice because, you know, your mom might be in the inner critic a little bit as well. And we do have an episode, or probably several, on inner critic to help you with that voice, because that will accompany you on this mini journey of 3 sentences that you can really take to whatever depth you'd like.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, you know, I think we've talked to people who are like, oh, I feel like I lost so many decades of my life in living this way or being in this relationship or being in this job or whatever it is. And people are afraid and they don't want to risk, I'm putting in air quotes, losing more of themselves or their lives, right? I'm going to call it in misalignment, in living in a way that isn't fulfilling, right? Isn't true for them. And this is a great way, like I don't want to use the word only because maybe that's not true, but when we are not able or willing to face and feel the reality of the moment and the reality of our lives, we are more at risk of losing years, right? Because it's the ability to look at my life with some compassion and look at the reality of what is working, what is not working for me, what is beginning to work a little bit better, that we can get a sense of is this where I'm meant to be? Is this where I should be staying? Which things do I want to keep in my life or continue to do an approach in this way? And which things maybe it's time to reevaluate or tweak? Mm-hmm. And which things do I want to bring a little bit of time and spaciousness to let them emerge and evolve because something is starting to feel good about that part?
Yeah, totally. And I want to suggest to listeners that you can choose whatever topic you want to, or multiples for this set of prompts. But it can be helpful to choose something that isn't like a big emotional charge or like a current activation that you have going on in your life. Mm. So when G first introduced this topic to me, I of course went to all the giant thoughts and then luckily recognized the feeling of overwhelm in my brain and went, this means I need to chunk it down and make it smaller and more accessible for myself.
Yeah, and smaller and more accessible is really to say, choose a theme, topic, area of your life, situation that like doesn't feel supercharged.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think as we talk about this, we'll probably come up with some examples of what that might be for different people. But yeah.
I've got, so the example that I went to from like relationships to household heating.
Right. So what you're saying is your first impulse or the first thought that crossed your mind was, okay, let's do this assessment on my relationships.
Yeah.
And then you're saying something in your body told you that feels really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And too big, probably, for where I want to begin with.
Yeah.
So then you changed it.
Yeah.
And you changed the focus to what? Household what?
Heating.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Can you, is it time yet? Or I don't know how we're, okay. Do you want to walk us through the 3 prompts under the theme of household heating?
I do, yeah.
I feel like that was just a game show. Like, so for the chance to win $500, Stephanie Hunter.
Yeah. So, and remind me of the order. It's what's working, what's not, and what's starting to work.
Yeah, something that's working in the area of household heating
is my wood stove.
Your wood stove. Okay. So, would you, for the sake of practicing, really owning your reality, just form that into one sentence where you use that beginning prompt. Something that's working in my life is, or something that's working in the area of household heating is.
Yeah. Something that's working in the area of heating my home is my wood stove.
Yeah. And maybe just even feeling, right? Taking a moment to feel like, how does it feel in the body to recognize that, acknowledge that is one part of your current reality.
I have a lot of, because I'm so self-assessy, there's so many little details here that I can feel and think through and appreciate the journey of in household heating.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Neat. And what I think you're sharing with us is highlighting that you can say the thing and think the thing, and there's nothing wrong with just staying at it on that level with these prompts. You can certainly do that. But if you want to practice going to a body level, you could also pause and feel, hey, when I say this thing out loud, how does it feel? What shows up in my body? And I think what you're saying is, wow, a lot shows up for me.
Yes. Do you want me to get into some of what shows up for me?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. The first thing that shows up is the joy of warmth. You know, it's winter here right now. I live in a home where the, what do you call them? Electric baseboard heaters don't warm the space in a useful way. So I spent a couple years just being cold and not being able to access the what could I do to aid my cold situation, right? It was just like, I'll put on a sweater and huddle and hope for the best, you know?
And can I pause you for a second? and ask a clarifying question. So when you say, and not being able to access what I could do about it other than let's put layers on and maybe just tough it out. What do you mean by that?
I was overwhelmed in a way that trying to arrange and pay for a wood stove was not something I could even think of. My brain and heart were occupied with painful things that cut off access to like progress and hope, you know?
So meaning like you were going through other things in life at that time that made it so that there wasn't even enough space and brain capacity to like problem solve your way out of that cold issue.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that mental space, being in that space for me is a very, and probably for everyone, a quite disempowered space. So the idea of like, what step could I take to make this better or good or ideal? We're just like,
So I want to highlight that that's a normal human experience. That sometimes we're going through things and our capacity to problem solve is low, very low. And that doesn't mean you're bad or wrong or that your capacity will never be higher. It just means at that time, you don't have access to it. Because like looking back now, you're like, oh, I arranged that. I could arrange that. It wasn't something I had access to then. So there's also a sweetness even in reflecting on just this.
Yeah.
Right? That like, yeah, Steph, like it's okay. Sometimes we go through such hard things and we have to use almost all of our energy in order just to like cope and be with what's hard. Yeah. That there's not much left in the tank for these other things that can seem like simple things to take care of.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe now in hindsight, when you do have more capacity, maybe it was still clunky, but maybe it felt somewhat easy. Right. So this is also like noticing, do you crap on yourself afterwards? Right? Do you have that habit? And if you do, that's okay. But is that a habit you want to start shifting of like, wow, after the fact, when I reflect back, I can have some compassion for myself, that part of me who was going through such a hard time that I couldn't access problem solving.
Yeah.
And now I do have access to it. And the stove got arranged. And that's a part of my life that's working well right now.
Yeah. Even this wording I've chosen, access, in my mind, that's kind of a judgmental way for me to think like, oh, I didn't have something that I could have had, you know? Whereas I think the way that I actually think about it is that it was not my path. It wasn't an available path at that time. And that feels sort of nicer to me. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
So warmth was one of the things that comes up, but also work. It brings up a lot of work, a lot of wood chopping and arranging and storing of wood and bugs. And when it rains, when am I going to chop my wood? And like that kind of thing. I think those were the main bits that came up.
Was there some, when you say warmth, was that a pleasant feeling you noticed when you were acknowledging, hey, like this is a part of my life that's working well right now?
Yes. And it's interesting because it's in such a wild juxtaposition to how cold I used to be. Like, and because that wasn't what was happening at the time, being warm is just not what was happening. I wasn't able to give a lot of attention to that. And now that I have the contrast, like when I go out and I'm somewhere cold and I know I get to come home to a warm house with a fire crackling is such a nicer feeling than like, I remember viscerally the feeling of last winter not wanting to go out at all because I was cold inside and then I was cold outside and I was just cold all the time. And now when I step out from the warm house into the cold, it's like bracing and refreshing and crisp and lovely. So I have a whole new dimension of experience that I just didn't have before. Plus the hopelessness. So I'd be cold and I'd be like, and there's no way out. You know?
Yeah. So neat how so much arises, right? Just thinking about one area of your life that's working well and noticing it can also take me to, oh crap, how much wood do I have to chop and when do I have to chop it? And are there going to be yucky bugs? Great. And then we get to choose next. Do I want to orient more to those thoughts? Or do I want to orient more to like, oh, it feels so good now that I know what warmth feels like, that I can appreciate cold and know that warmth is available to me when I come home, you know? We get to choose what we pay attention to, right? Where we place focus.
It also feels really good to have the aliveness of a fire in my home. So like this time last year, it was just me in a cold house. And now it's a warm house with a crackling, vibrant fire and a cat. Like it's a totally different sensation, you know? And I want to add that leading up to the acquisition of this wood stove were some fears that I knew I could be with. Because of this new capacity, you know. I knew that, so acquiring firewood, like I live on a small island, there's a competitive firewood situation. It has to cure, like there's a bunch of considerations, and then getting it brought here. So I was like, okay, I'm now going to be in charge of having to get my own fuel source in competition with other people. And then I'm going to have to get comfortable with an axe and chopping things. Like I put that off for months. And then when it got cold enough, it was like, I've reached this place where I can approach the axe and the hatchet and learn about chopping wood and different kinds of wood and how they're going to behave and all of that. Like I grew into that. It wasn't just, yay, we're off to the races. It was, yay, this thing will feel good. There's some small hurdles to get past and, you know, we'll get there.
Yeah, and we'll get there. And I have faith and trust in myself that I will figure it out and I will call in the people I need to call in to support me. Right? Yeah. That's a really good knowing to recognize within ourselves.
Yeah. It's neat because in the past, I would have just felt that looming need to do the scary thing, and I would have just low level fretted about it and been anxious for months. But now I'm able to go, oh, I notice the sensations of feeling anxious about this. And I know that there will come a time where I don't feel anxious. I will deploy all of my resourceful skills and getting support and learning, and I'll be able to tackle this when the time comes. And until then, I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Whoa. Talk about a shift.
Yay! Yeah. Yay! Look at what's possible when you're open to just building your muscle to be with what's hard little by little, right? And your muscle to see your ability a little bit more clearly, little by little.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Very neat.
So then the what's not working, are you ready for that now?
I'm ready for that. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay.
It's still in the heat. We're all in this entire series
for
me.
Theme. Got it. Yeah. And I want to say very quickly is that we just talked a lot about Steph's first thing of what's working well. But like, you don't have to give it that much time or energy or space, right? When I walk through these prompts, like sometimes I am giving it extra space, but sometimes I'm just like, boom, boom, boom. Like I'm just saying the three sentences, maybe feeling them in my body, depending on whether I feel like that or not and how much time I have. But like, don't let the fact that we're conversing a lot about each one of these things make you believe that this is a very time-consuming practice.
Yeah. We just like to talk.
That is the reality
It is.
that I have learned to accept.
We're being with it. Yeah. Okay, so the thing that's not working is wood, access to the wood and the chopping block. It is a big log that you chop wood on. And I'm still using my friend's axe. I don't have my own axe, which might be, maybe I don't need one, but This actually feels really good to me, being able to just identify clearly without judgment or anxiety, oh, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
Something here's going to have to change. I don't need to know how right now. I just notice it.
Right. Okay. And to just elaborate a touch, which again, you don't have to do, but I'm just a curious person and I have learned to accept that about myself. Can you add on to that? This piece is not working right now and add a because?
Yeah. So something that's not working right now in the area of heating my home is access to wood and chopping station, because it's in a big wet field with a huge muddy stump that I need to move onto the grass every time, and it's too heavy for me.
Got it. Right. So just noticing that, like, I'm just going to walk Steph through noticing it on a body level, but you don't have to do that part. But like, what do you notice about owning that whole truth, right? By stating it in that way, and then just taking a moment to feel it in the body.
Two different parts are activated. The one that feels good and strong and impressive by moving the thing that's too heavy for me and doing the difficult stoic thing. And the other part that loves ease and knows that, so there's a lazy part of me that wants ease, and then there's a realistic part of me that knows if this was more accessible, I wouldn't have to make sure that it was a sunny day and that I'm chopping wood on a sunny day. Like if it was raining, I could also access my fuel source.
Yeah. So it's neat to recognize that when I own that piece that's not working for me right now, and I track in the body, different things show up, right? One part that wants more ease, one part that feels like a sense of strength, being stoic and strong. And we don't have to do any more with that if we don't want to. We can just carry on to the next prompt. But if you were, say, you wanted to, or you wanted to come back to it, you could use the recognition of those parts to help inform how you might want to bring some change.
Yeah.
Right. And which part you feel a little bit more led by, right? Or a little bit more led by in winter.
Yeah.
But you also don't have to sit with that too long. We can just move on to the next thing. And that's part of the practice, is the ability to shift from what is working in one sentence to what is not, to what is starting to work better. Right? And grow that muscle of, I have the ability to shift focus. I am not perpetuating an old pattern that has me just going around in circles on one thing. And typically we go in circles on the things that don't make us feel very good. Right? So we're learning just to honor that each one of these things is part of my current day reality. And I also know how to switch from thing to thing to thing. I don't have to stay in just the good one in order to feel okay. I don't have to dwell in the one that's hard to make myself feel horrible and hopeless and helpless. And like, there's also something beyond that, right? Yeah. Looking at what is starting to get better. But also, again, I don't have to like just bypass what's hard and focus only on what's starting to get better, right? I'm just learning that all three are important and are deserving of some time and attention.
Yeah. I really need my focus to be directed specifically in this way, or I will tend to either not notice that something isn't working because I've like shut down to that, or it needs to become dramatically bad for me to notice it. You know, if I'm doing it with prompts like this that are simple and straightforward and not loaded with anything, I don't need to engage those parts of my brain that are less helpful.
Right. So I really like that you highlight this. When I'm given some of the structure and direction and how to pay attention, right, to what's happening in my life, I don't have to wait until something is dramatically bad before it catches my attention, right? Some of us have, out of survival, had to be a little bit blind, whether in our seeing or feeling or hearing of things that don't feel okay. We had to shut off from that. And we might notice a pattern of, oh, I tend to only take care of things or notice things when things are dramatically bad. Mm-hmm. So this is a great way to start growing that muscle of noticing when things are just starting to feel a little off or don't really feel like what feels good. Right. Yeah. And some of us might not know yet what that feeling is because it's so foreign. I only know it's decent or it's horrible.
Yeah.
Or I only know it's excellent, which it barely ever is, or it's horrible. I don't really know what the in-between feels like. I don't know not just what it feels like, but I couldn't recognize it when it's happening in terms of like which experiences qualify for, in my view, as like decent or good or starting to feel uneasy. Yeah. And so this is a way where we can practice just getting to know what feels good and not so good for you earlier.
And in a specifically drama-free manner, like internally. So if I'm practicing with myself, admitting what isn't working without needing to change it, then suddenly this is translating into my relationships where I can let people know what isn't working without an expectation or some dramatic, like as if they're trying to withhold something from me or deny me, whatever it is. It's just a simple statement and it feels so much more spacious.
Mm-hmm. And if you've ever worried about other people criticizing you or thinking poorly of you, when you can sit with and own, this is not working in my life right now, this area, you're not spending all this energy trying to hide it from other people discovering that this is, or pointing it out to you. You're like, yeah, I could tell you that it's not working. Yeah. And it's just very matter of fact and simple.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that allows us to be present with people and enjoy people more. When we're not constantly worrying about, oh, what are they going to point out about my life that's not working? Right? Yeah. Or like, how do I have to like avoid letting us go towards that topic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like I'm going to usher you to the next one.
Thank you.
What's something that's starting to work a little bit better?
Yes. In the area of household heating.
I was wondering why you were doing that with your hands, but it was all a thing that it all had to come together like that.
Yeah. In the area of household heating, something that's starting to work is combining a curtain usage on drafty windows and fire bricks in the absence of chopped lumber. Period.
Nice. And if you wanted to, you could just notice how that feels in the body to acknowledge that this is starting to work a little bit better.
It feels progressive and empowering. These tiny different ways of thinking about things make such a difference. It's just wild. If I didn't have this framework for something that's starting to work, I could have just thought of both those things, fire bricks and curtains, as being sort of part of the problem. Like I've got this problem of the house being cold. Oh, and then I've got to close the curtains and I got to get these fire bricks because I don't have a woodshed and, meh.
But and then instead, how are you feeling?
yeah, I'm feeling surly about it and hopeless. But when I look at it in this different, smaller context with this lovely, simple reframe, it's like, oh yeah, I'm taking steps. I'm doing things. I'm on the road to where I want to be, and I have tools to get there.
Yes. And when hearing you say, I'm taking steps, I'm sort of on my way, I'm doing things, like I'm creative problem solving, that's essentially what you're saying, right? It's also neat to notice there was a time last year when that, like you said, wasn't available, it wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And so like recognizing that, like something that's starting to work better is that like I'm able to find some in-between solutions while I'm working on a bigger solution.
Yeah.
How cool is that? When last year I was nowhere near that.
Yeah.
Right? What is it like in my body right now to recognize that I've come this far since last year? Right? That I'm able to think of some in-between measures I could take that help make my house feel better for me.
So nice. So simple.
Nice. So simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gigi.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? You want to run through some very empowering reframe prompts?
I will run through some. Maybe we won't spend as much time on them, and I'll run through them just to give us a sense of like what they could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Stephanie just walked us through like a very thematic way of using the prompts, right? It was really isolated to household heating. And it was focused on an area that brought you less emotional charge than the idea of relationships, right? For example. So you can take using these prompts as narrow as you want or as wide as you want in terms of a theme in your life or an area. But you can also mix them up so they have nothing to do with each other. Right. So I think maybe I'll start with one of those where this is 3 working through the prompts where they're not connected. They're not in the same area of life. So something that's working well in my life right now, and even as I see the words on my paper, I'm already starting to smile, is my connection with my kids. They are almost 15 and 12, turning 13, going through a very distinct stage of development. It feels really good to feel very connected to them as they're going through that change. And in putting the period at the end of that sentence, I could say so much more, but like that, and I'm just going to feel it for a moment. And there's like a warm, fuzzy feeling in my chest, and a aw, and a little sense of pride, like, good job, mama. Like, you've worked at making sure you stay most connected with what matters to you and not letting yourself get too lost in all the things in life that you need to be taken care of. That there's this thread of like, I feel connected to my kids and I know they feel connected to me even as they're moving towards connection with others more. And so that feels nice. Oh, I want to say one more thing. So as we were walking through the prompts, we're sort of chatting about what comes up for us. We're reporting a little bit about how we notice it coming up in the body. Maybe we're sharing a little bit about why these are significant to us. And that's great. If you have the habit of like always staying small, not saying much about yourself, then you might want to practice adding some information that makes it more fulsome, the real reflection of you and why this matters to you. And I'm talking about as you, if you're willing, share some of this with people in your life. And if you're sharing with people in your life and you tend to have the habit of, I have learned that I have to justify everything. I have to justify my experience to people. You might purposely say, all I'm going to say is one short sentence. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to be with how it feels in my body to not justify and explain and give more detail and explanation.
Yeah.
Right? So if I were choosing to practice that, I might have done it this way. I might have said, something that's working well in my life right now is how connected I feel to my kids. That's it. And I'm just going to hold that and enjoy that for me without having to explain to anyone about why I think that's important, why that's important to me, and how I did it, and how I would have done it in the past, right? And for me, if I look at my old patterning, both of those muscles needed to grow. the muscle to just say less and not explain and justify, and the muscle to say more to let people know more of me and see more of me. So both were helpful for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Something that's not working well in my life right now. There's some humor in this too. And I like that when we can bring some humor, because this actually used to be something I felt embarrassed and ashamed about and judge myself for. But I've gotten to a place where I can just laugh about it and just call it what it is. Something that's not working well in my life right now is putting away the things in my suitcase after a trip. They just sort of like hang out there. It becomes like an extra drawer of clothes.
Yep.
And they slowly make their way to, the laundry.
Laundry hamper.
Right?
I have the same one, the same suitcase.
Yeah, same suitcase. And so anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that right now.
Nice.
Something that's starting to work a bit better in my life. And again, noticing this used to be another area that I felt a lot of shoulding, a lot of shame, and a lot of avoidance about. And to this day, like when I say it's starting to get a bit better, just a bit, not even a lot of bit, like a tiny, tiny bit, which is tracking my spending.
God.
Right? I've sort of been in a, I would call it a privileged situation where I haven't had to like count every penny, but it has been something I've wanted to have more awareness about, right? And feel more empowered in, is like knowing what's happening with my money. And so that's an area where it's starting to shift. And by better, I mean, I'm moving more towards what feels good for me, right? And that's going to be different for everybody, right? So this isn't like the better or worse, something's good or bad. It's just, it would feel better for me to have more awareness about where my money's going. And
this is a really good distinction, because the prompt we're suggesting is something that's starting to work. So knowing what our definition of work means, like I think in the past, this would have unconsciously been like, what would my mother approve of?
Right? Yeah. Right. And so a lot of things might not come under that column if that's how we define it. Right. Yeah. So choosing how you define it. Also, how are you defining what's working? How are you defining what's not working? Right. Those are great questions to ponder as well.
Yeah.
So that was one set. I'll share another set from, this was in the past. So right now, I think you and I, we just shared using those 3 prompts in something that's current. Right. But I'm going to do a little bit of reflecting on the past with these 3 prompts. So I'm backtracking to, I'd say about 5 years ago in my life, when went through probably, I would say, the most traumatic time of my life, the hardest time. And so at that time, something that was working well was I was showering. And that meant I had to redefine working well, because there would have been a time where I would not have defined that as working well.
Right.
But I was showering every day. So I'm calling that it was working well. Something that was not working well was feeding us. I didn't have the capacity to think about buying food, going to get food, making food, feeding us. Right? That was not an area of life that was going well at that time. It wasn't dire. So I'm differentiating between that too. But I just want to acknowledge it wasn't going super well. And what was starting to get a bit better, or starting to work a bit better at that time, was me learning to ask for help. Right. So yeah, it's neat even now, 5 years later, to be able to talk about and acknowledge that was the reality of then.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, to be able to bring our past into part of me. That is part of me. It doesn't define me, but that is a part of me. Right. Yeah. And there's something that feels for me more complete, more sturdy, to be able to look at that part of my life and not feel any particular charge, not feel like I have to distance away from it because it was a hard time, not being like, oh, thank God that's over. Like, yeah, maybe that could show up and it would be okay if it showed up, but that's not actually there for me. It's just like, oh, that was a part of my life.
Yeah.
Right. I think maybe 3 years ago, I might have had more of the feeling of, oh, thank God that's over.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you can reflect at any point over, over the past, and you choose how far back you want to go.
There's I just want to say something quickly about that. The gifts that can come out of our difficult situations or difficult relationships that are too spicy at the time or for a few years after to be able to approach, it really is valuable to go back and look with this objective, less emotional, less dramatic lens, and to be able to acknowledge what worked and what didn't. And it feels like a really useful, practical tool to bring into your life.
Yeah. Right. And like when I look at 5 years ago, what was starting to work better, this asking for help, I acknowledge that, hey, that's sort of for me where it started to begin. Like I wasn't very good at that before. And then I can reflect, if I wanted to, on the last 5 years and how far I've come in that area. Right. And then actually that could be the thing I reflect on. What's working well right now in asking for help? What's not working so well? What's starting to work better? Right. Like our lives, like there's just next layer, next layer, next layer.
Yeah.
Right. There's constant, like things are evolving and changing all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, I have a fun way to use this. If I had used this at the time when I was in a relationship with this particular person, I would have faced and learned to be with reality so much sooner and probably made some different choices in my life. And
Whoa. That was like you actually would have been able to do that? Like
No. I didn't have capacity back then to do that. I didn't have capacity back then to do that, but I think I would have shortened the amount of time I stayed in something that was hard.
Or shortened the amount of possibility for the future, like being able to look back and go, oh, this is not something that actually feels good. And then inserting that into future relationships.
Yes. Right. So I'm not saying, hey, like, let me look back and say all the things I could have done differently. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, had I had this tool in my life before and been practicing building the capacity to look at my life in this way, I probably would have made some different choices on a different timeline. And that's not a shitting on myself thing. That's a realizing, wow, there's a lot of power in a practice like this.
Yeah.
Right. And how cool that I have access to it now and for in the future. Right. But I didn't have access to this at the time, and that's okay. And I stayed for however long I stayed, and that's okay. And that makes sense for like where I was at the time.
Yeah. Well, I think what I was meaning, maybe you mean the same thing, but to clarify for myself, if I had had this tool at the time of the relationship I'm thinking of, I wouldn't have been able to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean?
I think that I might have been able, like, it's hard to say because I don't exactly remember capacity at the time, but I know that capacity was very different at the time. There might have been elements that I could have applied.
Yeah.
It still might not have been enough for me to like really change how I handle the situation or the amount of time I hung out in that relationship.
I think I probably would have lied to myself, Do you remember that experience? Have you had that experience of having to
I lied to myself a lot in that relationship. Tons.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of facing reality.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. I remember the feeling of in women's group doing maybe like full moon intention setting exercises. And for a question like this of what's working well when I was actively in a very difficult relationship, I would have come up with a bunch of answers for what were working well. And in hindsight, I can't agree. They were not working well.
And like, that's also part of recognizing humanness.
Yeah.
Is that at that time, they either felt like they were working well, or you were consciously or subconsciously needing to tell yourself they were working well.
Yeah.
Right? So this isn't about like, I gotta be super accurate about my answers. This is just practicing reporting what you believe to be true in the moment. And the more you get to know yourself and how your body speaks to you, the more you're going to be able to catch yourself. Like if I were to say something that's working well right now is, I don't know what, but like I have more capacity now to notice in my body when it's yeah, that feels true. Or like, like, does it? Is it working well? Or do I just want to think that it's working well or pretend that it's working? Like I would have more awareness of that now than in the past.
I remember writing answers because I thought we'd have to read them back out to the group of people and it wanting to be impressive sounding. Like I'm trying to do work for personal growth, but I'm eschewing that because I'm actually trying to impress people. My inner critic is suggesting I need to do all these things that are not me to be acceptable.
And like, this is why it helps to be doing this with people if you feel open to it. Because like when I do this with clients, they might say something and I'll be like, would it be okay if I, presented some maybe confronting questions, right? Or would it be okay if we checked in with your body right now? You just said this thing is going well, right? How does that feel in your body? Like, which part of that feels true? How much of it doesn't feel true? Like, is there a part of you doubting it? Some people might be like, ooh, yeah, maybe. Other people are like, no, this is totally true. But then I might say, like, would it be okay if I, like, said something that might be a bit hard to hear? And they might say yes. Like, so you're saying that this is going well, but I also know that last week or for the last 3 months, you've also spoken about this element and this element and this element. And you didn't seem particularly pleased with those things. So do you just want to sit with that for a minute? Like how that feels to hold all of those truths. And then you're like, oh shit. And then they laugh. And then we laugh together. We're like, yeah, that happens sometimes. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe there's an element of that that's going well, and then they're realizing there's an element that maybe is not going as well as they're telling themselves.
Yeah.
That happens. We're human. We're trying to protect ourselves.
Right? Yeah. I hope that listeners can hear your voice saying those things and providing this reframe as they go through this work, because I know how critical we can be of ourselves.
Yeah. And like recognizing that, like, sometimes that's just where someone needs to be, believing that something is good when maybe in actuality it's not that great. And like being a good friend or like being a support person is like learning to feel into like what seems like it would be supportive right now. What do I feel like they have capacity to be with right now? Am I willing to check in if there's like permission to say this thing, whether they're welcoming of this thing right now, or whether they just need me to like be quiet and be like, yeah, that feels like it's going well for you right now. Okay. Right. Yeah. So there's that. Should I go back to this past relationship thing? Okay. I think there would have been a time if I was using these prompts that I would have come to this conclusion. But definitely in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, these are super true of that time. So, but it would have been met with a lot more resistance, I think, facing this reality. So in that relationship, what was working well was when we're together, things feel so good. Right? Even now, I'm like, when I say it, I'm like, yeah, That was the reality. In that relationship, what was not working, and I'm changing the phrasing a little bit. What was not working for me was, right? That's a good distinction, because it could be working for somebody else, but not working for you. And this is what we want to really get to is it working for you? Right? And are you willing to allow yourself to be a factor in the equation? So it wasn't working for me that there was always this threat of like him ending the relationship. Like it was always like in and out and all over the place. Like he'd break up with me and then he'd be like, oh, actually, I don't want to do that. And then, oh, no, like we're back on. No, we're back off. And like, if he were doing the prompts, he might have said, that works for me, right? That I can sort of just be in and out with whatever feels right in the moment. But it was not working for me, that it was so all over the place. And what was starting to work a bit better was me speaking up for myself to say, hey, this doesn't actually feel good. Right? And I say starting because often then I couldn't hang out there for too long. Like I would feel bad for like making him feel bad. And then I'd try to make him feel better. So it wasn't something that was like super sturdy for me yet, speaking up for myself and like maybe setting some boundaries, but it was beginning to get better. I was starting to say, hey, like this doesn't feel nice for me. Yeah. Right. If I would have used something different, like I could have used what was starting to get better was maybe our breakups would only last, he wouldn't ghost me for like 3 months, right? He would just
it's not working for me.
2 weeks, right? So this is also interesting to note is when we tend to hang out in, well, this is getting better.
Oh, yeah.
And we only stay with that component, right? So if we only stay in, well, this is starting to get better. And so that means I should stay, or that means it's enough for me, right? Or even harder, when you combine what's working well and what's starting to get better, but you ignore what's not working well. Right. That's a recipe for staying in things that for way longer when they're already past like misalignment.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
I had all the energy in the world for staying forever. But conversely, also all the energy in the world for catastrophizing. So like now I find myself noticing when, for example, I have a new whatever relationship we'll call it, where we're learning how to communicate with each other, and when there's hard conversations to be had, what that looks like, and obviously those conversations are difficult. It's the nature of hard conversations where people maybe have conflicting needs and are trying to work together. In the past, I would have just been like, this feels hard, it's not working. And now it really feels like this is starting to work. We're learning how to communicate with each other. Yeah, it's clunky at the beginning, and I can see how it's progressing in a positive way. Just wouldn't have been able to go there before, to be with any of the challenges.
Yes. Right. So things are shifting, and I wanted to tie this in. What you just said made me think of this. You're able to recognize nuance more now.
Yeah.
And like enjoy nuance more now, right? And I was just in a training recently, and they reminded us that, when we experience trauma, what gets taken away is our ability to feel and notice and see nuance and enjoy nuance. And so when you're able to say, hey, this wasn't working super great, but it's starting to get better. Like this element is starting to get better. These other elements still need some major work. And I see us clunking through this together.
Yeah.
That's your ability to like feel nuance more.
Yeah.
right? And like hold both more instead of it's like only one or only the other.
That's what it all is. When you even noticing the different elements, like in the past, and I remember you talking about different aspects of your relationship and me thinking like, oh, you just need to leave. Like what you're describing, you're talking about maybe our sex life and our communication and like, you know, helpfulness and resourcefulness and things like that. And I'm like, if any element is not going well, it is a bad relationship and you've got to go. Period. You know, and I could hear you and see you and other people talking about parts of things, but I was just like, they're a different kind of person than I am. I don't have parts. I have the whole shebang or nothing at all.
And what have you discovered since that time?
There are many elements. Things can work for me and not work for me in different ways. And that's life, babe.
It's life, like, babe. Yeah. So yeah, that was a little taste of how you can start growing your muscle for having a closer look at what's happening in your life, what's a reality in your life right now. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to inform you of like what to do next, but you're just practicing naming what's true and feeling what's true.
Yeah, I like it.
Right?
Tools for the curious observer.
Yes. And I think one thing I wanted to add to this is noticing like if you have a tendency to focus in on any one of these three more than others, or in different areas of your life. Maybe in relationships, you tend to focus only on what's working well, but in your area of finances, you only look at what's not going well. And right, those are like interesting patterns to uncover.
Yeah. This focus is so huge. There's people in my life right now, and I get to observe their relationship. And what I observe and what they experience are two totally different things, I'm sure, hopefully with some crossover. But it makes me think about how easy it is to just focus on something like he leaves his socks on the floor. Like, you know, he's like magical in all of these ways and so great in our relationship. But my focus is going to be those socks and how much of a bastard he must be for leaving these on the floor. He must not respect me at all.
Right. And maybe for somebody else, there's some more nuance in that.
Yes.
Right. And also, like, noticing the nuance of, like, you could be with one person that leaves socks all over the place and one person that totally did not. But there's and assuming that's something that bothers you, and there might be other things that are so good or not good, right, about the whole mix, that you're either like, the socks are make it or break it, or you're like, the socks don't matter.
Yeah.
But it's based on the whole reality of the relationship, right?
And that's the sense you get from, like, I'm thinking of the different vibe from couples who talk about things like this. Like, oh yeah, you know, she does these things that drive me bonkers, but you know, it's worth it. Versus that feeling, oh, you know, they're driving me bonkers, like, period. It's such a different and embracing feeling, right? These prompts that we've walked you guys through today help you be with all of these things as well, and to redirect focus to where you actually want it to be, where it's actually good in your life or relationship that feels good, and giving perspective to the whole shebang.
Yeah. I've been spending time, like, sort of like you, like, watching my friends in relationship and, like, noticing how fun it is to be in the energy of them laughing together about something that's just, like, doesn't work so well, but they're sort of both okay with it, right? And then also watching them talk about, oh, and there's these other things that feel not so great right now. And let's be really serious about giving that some time and attention, right? And, oh my gosh, I love you so much for these other things that you bring into relationship. And like, oh, like I noticed that we're emerging in this season of life and this thing that's been hard is starting to get better. Like to like watch a couple know how to dance in all of those three areas. Like my system just feels good being around people that have that ability.
Yeah.
Right. And want to do life that way.
Yeah.
Instead of just honing in on one or the other.
It feels good now, but it didn't I used to just feel confused and distrustful when I saw such a lovely, compassionate dance of trust, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we enjoy and want more of in our life can change over time, right? Based on our belief system, our nervous system capacity, what we're holding right now. Right?
Thank goodness. I want almost nothing from before times. I'm good. We've moved on.
I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Done that.
Lifelong series of errors. Good day.
Moving forward. In my freshest errors of life, right? If you want to call it that, because there's going to be years down the road where with more hindsight and with more nervous system capacity, we're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
I was okay with that. I thought that was the pinnacle.
Right? But it feels so much better to be present to that. Like now I can look back and go, oh, well, I thought that was the thing at the time, you know? But if I look back on totally dissociated times, I'm like, I don't even know what I thought the thing was. I guess I was just winging it all over the place. And
yeah, sometimes we have to wing it all over the place. Sometimes we need to dissociate and check out in order to like survive, right? Yeah. And how cool I find of the human potential and ability to heal and grow and change and shift.
Hear, hear.
Right? Yeah. So.
All right. Well, have you got a self-connection practice you'd like to do?
I would like to listen to your voices.
It was a little Irish for a second.
I would like to listen to your voices, my lady. And I have no idea what that is, but maybe that's what our practice can be. Just speak in a way that's not your own natural voice.
I will do that now.
Yes, would you like to do that with me?
Okay.
Oh, hello, Smidgen, or what? Poops. What's your name?
Imogen Poots. But I have to get right up in the camera to do Imogen. Let me see if I can do it.
Why, hello.
This is one of my voices I do. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
I'm an adult.
Yes, with freedom to speak however you like.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can bring up this voice that I used to do. Hello, my love. How are you today? What can I do for you? And my youngest and I, we would just make funny voices. And like that was a big deal for me because growing up, I sort of was conditioned with you have to be serious and classy and respectful. And what are you doing? That's not okay. So I was celebrating the fact that my kid didn't feel those constraints in his life. Yeah. And he could just go to like, hello, I'm Jimmy Bob and whatever. And he would just take it wherever. And then I would play and whatever. But my other kid, especially to that last voice, like the, hello, Stephanie, what would you like to do today?
He was afraid, wasn't he? Was he afraid?
Yes. He was afraid. He was like, Mommy, please stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And
my mom will do a freaky leprechaun is what I think of it as. She like narrows her eyes and looks side to side and she says, hello. And it just creeps me right out.
Yeah. So he has asked me to retire that voice. But like, this is a nice practice because it either elicits a lot of like playfulness and laughing, or it helps us like be with a little dose of discomfort, right? And maybe even grief of, wow, I haven't been encouraged and given the freedom to just play in silliness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really important element of interpersonal silliness here, and also intrapersonal within yourself. I have a new friend who she often will suddenly speak like a Scotsman. And it's just like, oh, we can play together. Like, it's this unconscious, you maybe haven't even noticed it's happened, but suddenly we're in a space where we can do that. And I've definitely noticed that when I have to assert myself in certain ways, I haven't yet figured out the pattern of what, I definitely will assert myself in an accent. Go figure.
Yes, I think someone actually suggested the next time you have an argument with your partner, do it in accents and weird, funny voices.
Yeah.
And like, notice what happens.
It's so great. It's so great for putting a little distance between ourselves and the unnecessary seriousness of life.
Yes, I like that. The unnecessary seriousness of life, which I just thought was a standard thing. Like, that is life. And this makes me think of recently, it was with friends, and we're all adults walking down the street like penguins, like just spontaneously. Like, I don't know where it came from. It didn't last super long, but for the moments that it was on, we were all super into it. And we just had a good laugh, and then you carry on. And like, that would have been like unfathomable in the past. I would have been either super uncomfortable. Actually, no, I would have been super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And been like, what is happening here?
And
there is no way in hell that I'm going to walk down the street. Not only walking like a penguin, but like, I don't think we were making sounds. Maybe we were making sounds, not penguin sounds, because I don't know what penguin sounds are, but making some sort of weird sounds.
If you had to guess what sound a penguin made, what sound would it be?
But that might be the turkey penguin.
It's a turkey
I don't know.
penguin. I like it. I love the feeling of doing things as a group, like reasons or no reasons. It's just so nice to do things in association and harmony, you know.
Harmonizing our inner penguins.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I should leave a small note here for Imogen Poots. I didn't know that Imogen Poots was a person. I just heard this name. I actually thought my friend who makes up silly names and words, we do that together, that she had made up this name in order for me to produce a voice and a face. And so that's where she came from.
Yes.
Imogen Poots is a real person, however, and nothing like that.
No?
No.
Hello, Imogen Poots.
Hashtag Imogen Poots.
Right. I think you should tag whoever that is and see what happens.
I will. Okay. On and on we go. Is there anything else to say?
No.
Okay. Well, then, thank you guys for being here. As always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.